Okay. So, hello everyone. My name is Molly Kaufman, for those of you who have not met me. And again, I just want to thank Julia for putting together this really beautiful online academy to give us the opportunity to be together globally in this particular time, especially where I think most of us have gone through at least a few lulls of maybe feeling isolated or feeling like our lives have changed a lot and we don't feel the same sense of connection. Here we have already just signed on in this particular moment. We're coming together from all over the world, different time zones, some of you, like we just said, are having your coffee, I'm cooking dinner, and yet here we are together as a global network. So it's a really special opportunity that you've given us, and I'm so happy to see the beautiful faces of the students who have signed on live with me. I'm gonna say this evening because it's evening for me, but of course, because we're diving into the realm of the subtle body, we will move beyond what is maybe considered real and talk tonight a little bit about some of the things that we can't really see and feel and touch with our hands, but that we know definitely exist. And from the perspective of yoga, that give us more elements to sort of evaluate and explore what is this life, who are we, and what is really the foundation of balance and ultimately happiness and maybe even love. But just real quickly, I'll step back and tell you that I am signing in this evening from Tuscany, Italy, where I have lived for the last 8 years. But I'm sure, as you can tell from the accent, I was born in the United States. So I'm a native English speaker, although I'm learning many other languages as I travel around the world. And my journey with yoga began at 18 years old when one of my dance teachers invited me to come to a class with him. And as with many people, I think in our day and age, I really entered the realm of yoga from the physical standpoint. I was a dancer, I was an athlete, and I actually, my very first yoga class, if you can believe it, was a Bikram yoga class. So like the hot, very structured kind of experience. But what it did was really help me keep my body healthy and vibrant for all that I was asking of it as a dancer. And just like many of us as well, I had already connected very deeply with some of the Eastern philosophies, Taoism and Buddhism. And little by little, as I continued to take each step, one foot in front of the other as we go along the yogic path, I began to discover that actually what I was doing physically was simply a representation, like a vehicle that I was first a passenger on, and now I feel a little bit more like a driver on, really helping me to embody these philosophies that I had already fallen in love with. And that's what, when we enter the realm of yoga philosophy, that's really what, in a way, we're doing, is exploring what are the foundations of yogic thinking as they pertain to life, and how does that relate back to maybe what we're doing in our everyday lives with our relationship with yoga, so that little by little we can begin to become the embodiment of the ideas of yoga and ultimately of yoga itself, this idea of unification, of unity. But in 1 hour, as you can imagine, we are entering a field of thousands and thousands, and probably even, beyond tens of thousands of years of knowledge. And so we're gonna try to dive in deeply, but we're also gonna try to keep it relevant to how we're living our lives now, because in that way, obviously, we can kind of hold on to what we're exploring. Everybody with me so far? Yeah, okay. If at any time, for those of you signed on to Zoom, we will have a question and answer time at the end of the lecture, but just in case, if there's something that I say that really is like Mayday, Mayday, I totally am not getting it. Please maybe just give me like a little shimmy hand or something, and we'll do our best to navigate it in the most graceful way, because obviously moving into the realm of philosophy, it's important that you feel at least able to sort of follow along step by step. And in Monday's lecture, I gave my version of the butterfly effect, and I won't repeat it tonight because on Monday I did completely the Italian thing and I went way over my time, and Julia was very gracious in letting me do that. So to not chew up some of the time that we have together, the summary of my butterfly effect is that once you take even one step onto the path of yoga, you are already inviting yourself into receptivity, right? None of us embark on this journey or relationship with yoga, wherever you are in your journey, without some desire to learn or to open a horizon or to open a perspective. So we already, just by even signing on together tonight, we're already all open to receiving some sort of information, some sort of message, some sort of understanding. And so all I want to invite you to do is what lands on you tonight in this moment, what resonates with you this morning for some of you in the next hour, just let it land. And that's exactly what you need to hear, how you need to hear, and what you need to carry away from this experience. And all of the other chatter that you might hear in and amongst the things that really strike your heart like Cupid's arrow, just let them be. Because the next step you take, the next Zoom you log on to, the next class you walk into, that information is going to come to you again. And when the moment is right to receive something a little bit deeper or something in a new way, then you will receive it. And so you don't need to try to cram everything that I say in an understandable way. I just invite you, I guess, let's all just kind of be in a rain shower of exploration tonight. And however that washes over you, it will wash over you, and it will be the exact right connection that you need for your passage right now. Okay? So tonight's subject is the Nadis. And on Monday, we jumped into the realm of the subtle body. And so I'm just going to repeat a few things so that we kind of collaborate ourselves on the same page. But as we are all in some way practitioners of yoga, one of the things, right, we talk about all the time, and I'm sorry if you're eating your breakfast, chew fast, because we're going to do just a little bit of breathing together here. One of the things that we definitely know is that it's great to think about things, but it's even better to practice them. And so even moving into this next hour together, it's a really beautiful way to enter, just to pause for a second and breathe. So wherever you are, in your kitchen, in your bedroom, wherever you happen to be, find a comfortable seat in whatever way is easiest. Don't do too many rearrangements because it's not going to be a long one. Try to find a position where your spine feels nice and straight. And then when you're ready, go ahead and close your eyes and just follow the rhythm of my voice for the next few moments. And again, the closing of the eyes, not a shutting out of the world, but simply an invitation to listen a little more keenly to your experience of life in this moment. And so see if you can soften the muscles of the face and the jaw just a little bit. Let the shoulders fall naturally. And just let the breath follow its natural rhythm. And as it does, begin to bring your mind's eye in the direction of watching the breath. Almost as if this moving in and moving out of the air, the prana, the chi, was one of the most fascinating things you've ever watched, you've ever felt, you've ever experienced. And for the next few rounds of breath, just keep your mind's eye, your imagination there, feeling, sensing, and experiencing this filling up and this softening, this energizing and natural letting go. Maybe even beginning to become more aware of the fact that this partnership creates your life. The in and the out, the filling and the emptying, the energizing and the softening. Maybe through that investigation, also noticing that the breath naturally begins to even itself out. The edges soften. There becomes less of a differentiation between in and out and in. The breath just flows and circles through you, within you. Let the imagination soften just a little bit. Take a nice deep breath in, and on the exhale, part the lips and just have a gentle sigh out. And just do that one more time. A big deep breath in and a gentle sigh out. And then let the breath return to its natural rhythm. Be feeling and sensing and watching the experience of your body, your mind, and also the breath for another moment or two. And then as you're ready, let the eyes flutter open. Find an easy place again in front of your computer. Okay, so now we've landed on the spaceship together. Yeah, and as yogis, I always love to remind both myself and students that it can be that easy, right? We're all trying to navigate life in a harmonious way, in a balanced way. And often as we start on the wheel of yoga, we begin to, in a way, make it a little dogmatic. Like, I must get to this class, I must go to this teacher, I must roll out my mat, I must do all of these things to access the yoga. But sometimes it's really as simple as just closing the eyes and sitting up nice and tall and breathing in and out a few times. And hopefully our talk about the nadis today will give you a deeper sense of why that is. For those of you joining me on the screen, do you feel a little more integrated just with 1 minute of breathing, right? It's so special, it's so magical and so simple.
Yeah.
So we're going to begin our investigation of the nadis. So this word nadi, nada, the word nadi is an interesting word, mostly because when we translate things from an ancient language like Sanskrit into English, there isn't really a direct translation because the word itself carries an inherent kind of meaning. But when we say the word nadi, what we're really talking about is a tube-like structure that also within its definition has an inherent movement. And because today we're embarking into the world where I've already told you we're sort of without form and shape already, right? We're like, okay, well now you're saying there's a tube. So what does that mean? It really means that in our imagination, we can imagine, right, a vibration or an energy in a tube-like fashion that inherent within it has movement, kind of like a river. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that. But before we dive specifically into the talk about the nadis, I would like to sort of get us into a balloon with two general thoughts. One is that all of life is vibration. The very foundation of everything we experience in this physical world, and the subtle body is in fact part of the physical world. Why? Because the foundation of life is vibration. And vibration in this life, in this realm, takes an infinite number of forms and manifestations. And the example that I gave on Monday is a nice one, and I'll just do it briefly because it is kind of a nice one to start wrapping your head around it. And the example, the metaphor we can use is like water, right? So water is a particular element, and that element is that element because of the way that things are vibrating to make it come together. When water is vibrating at a very low frequency, it becomes ice. And it's very solid and it's very stable depending on what kind of temperature is surrounding it. But let's use our imagination that maybe we're in Iceland and the ice is with form. We can touch it, we can hold it in our hands, we can really feel it and understand its shape. When the molecules of water begin to vibrate at a slightly higher frequency, then it becomes water as we know it. And again, you can imagine, for those of you joining me again from Monday, right? Imagine sort of dipping your hand into a flowing stream. And you know that you're feeling water, but there's this beautiful inherent movement and vibration, right? So it's not like you can grab it and hold on to it, but you're very aware of its existence. And further, when the vibration of water comes to an even higher frequency, it becomes steam. And some steam is visible and some steam is invisible, but there is still, in fact, water, even though we don't feel it and touch it. And this sort of gives us a nice example to hold on to or to reroute into when we begin to talk about things that exist, but that don't necessarily have form. And so as all of life is vibration, in the yogic philosophy, one of the most pervasive manifestations of vibration is something that we call the life force, or something that we call prana. And prana is a type of animating vibration that actually takes all of the forms of life that we see. And I'm sure as yogis in some class or another, right? And you can feel free also, if I can see you on the video, to shake your head, because that also just helps me to, in our virtual world, to know that we're still kind of traveling together. But I'm certain that you've heard teachers talk about, breathe in the prana or access your prana, and if you've ever thought about it, you must be thinking somewhere along the line like, wow, this prana is pretty amazing because it seems to be everywhere. And in fact, it is. And in traditional Chinese medicine, we call it qi. In Japanese acupuncture, in Japanese traditions, they call it ki. But in all of these different ancient traditions, there is an understanding that the foundation of life is in fact vibration, that the animating force of life is a type of vibration or a manifestation of vibration that we call in the yogic philosophy prana. And this prana, this vibration, depending on what vessel it's traveling within or between or amongst, takes many different manifestations in life. And another way to think about this is, imagine that we are all musical instruments. And if you've ever played a musical instrument, I played the trumpet, but only for a year because I didn't like the feeling of my lips getting numb and all the spit in the thing, but okay. So you choose an instrument, right? We're all using our breath to put energy through the instrument. But if we all had different instruments, that same breath creates a different manifestation of sound, yes? And so this is kind of the nature of prana as it's interacting with different vessels, as it's communicating between different things. And I know it seems a little esoteric, but little by little, we're gonna plant these radici, these roots in this hour together. So all of life is really a symphony in a way of prana moving in different ways through different vessels to create different sounds and different interactions, okay? The other big premise that I would love to introduce before we get into the specifics of the Nadis is that another truth about life is that all of life is a relationship. Nothing in our physical world exists in isolation. Zero. And if you have studied any of the Eastern philosophies, right, you know karma is a tricky subject, so I'm not going to touch it too much, but what is karma but the law of cause and effect, right? And how do you have cause and effect, which is exactly the foundation of life, unless you have two things coming together to create a third thing? So the other foundation of all of life as we know it and experience it is in fact relationship. And sometimes this gives us room for pause, because so many times I feel like in the yogic journey, we're asked to sort of like self-isolate. I mean, we're asked to self-isolate in the world right now. So it's a very yogic thing, actually. This is a huge yogic opportunity, this coronavirus, because we're being asked to self-isolate. But think about it. If you are sitting in a room by yourself, are you really by yourself? No, you're in a relationship with the room. You're in a relationship with the air that's surrounding. You're in a relationship with your mind. You're in a relationship with your breath. There's no way to extract any part of existence into just one thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so we have vibration and we have relationship. That in yogic philosophy is kind of the foundation of everything. And in this realm of relationship, what I would love to do is I have the graphic if we need it. So if you feel like you need it, but what I would love to call your attention to, or your imagination to, is the Tai Chi symbol. Is everyone familiar with this? It's a Taoist symbol that is a circle. And there it looks like two dolphins dancing together. And one side is typically black, and one side is typically white, and there's a little dot of white in the black and a little dot of black in the white. Gita, are you with me? Yeah, so this is typically called the Tai Chi symbol. And I want to use this symbol like yin and yang, exactly, that's exactly where we're going, yes. So in this mode of relationship, where we're gonna start is actually that in all of the philosophies, in yogic philosophy and Taoism and Buddhism, all of life starts from one. And I just told you that all of life is relationships. So now you're a little bit mad at me, but don't be mad at me, because that one is actually without vibration. And that one becomes two. And those two are the foundation for every other thing that manifests in life. And one of my favorite symbols of this, it's almost like the story of creation, but it's also one of the most beautiful symbols of duality that I feel exists. And the symbol of the Tai Chi actually predates so many of the symbols that we see in yogic philosophy. It actually is a Taoist symbol. But what I want you to just get in your imagination, so I think we're all together, we have this Tai Chi, right? And we have one side that's black and one side that's white, and the mind automatically says like, okay, 50-50. Yes, but this symbol is so sophisticated and so beautiful. Why? Because that 50-50 is oriented in a way where the middle line is actually a curve, right? Like a dancing curve. And not only that, but the 50-50 isn't only on one side or the other side. And so much of our experience of life, right, is like, oh, I have to be there or I have to be there, or it has to be good or it has to be bad, or it has to be this or it has to be that. What the Tai Chi symbol is inviting us to consider, and where this leads us into, is also this experience of the subtle body, is that all of life is a relationship, and the foundation of life are these two entities, and as Gita typed in for me, right, usually represent yin and yang, which are in fact opposing entities, entities that seem very opposite. The yin side is usually the dark side. This is a very condensed form of vibration. It's a very physical form of vibration. We often consider it to also represent night, for example, or the feminine, or water, or inertia, things that don't move a lot. And the white side of the Tai Chi symbol is often representative, or is representative, of yang. And this yang energy is fire, it's metabolism, it's animation, it's day, it's sun, it's masculine, it's energizing. These two symbols are represented together in a dance, each with a piece of each other within them, purposefully, so that we understand that even though they appear to be opposites, they cannot exist without the presence of one another. We can't see the moon without the sun. We look at the moon and we say, oh, what a beautiful bright moon. But the assumption is that the sun is creating the light to help us see the moon, right? We can designate that it's nighttime only because there is also day. And so we begin to see that this is sort of the foundational relationship of life. And what the Tai Chi symbol is actually a symbol of utter harmony, of balance, of life in unity. And it has these two opposing entities purposefully shaped the way they are. The biggest part of the black has the little white in it. So we remember that the seedling of yang must exist for yin to be abundant, and vice versa. But the line in between is dancing. Why? Because balance is not a static place. Balance is actually a dance where two dualities remember that they must have one another to exist. And as Hatha yogis, right, most of us are coming into the yogic tradition from the Hatha yoga tradition. What is Hatha? Hatha is sun moon. And so most of us are practicing a type of yoga that inherent within it already is telling us it's really the key to life and the key to understanding a lot of what this idea of yoga is being able to return to the Tai Chi, being able to remarry, that's a tricky word, but I'm just going to use it anyway, remarry the dualities of life back into a tango, rather than what we often want to do, which is to find the one duality or the other. Yeah? Everybody with me so far? So we have vibration and we have relationship at the foundation of what is a lot of what yoga philosophy brings us. And as we are investigating this particular subject of the subtle body, what we really want to begin to investigate is how all of this relates to how energy moves through us. And this is what we are exploring in essence with our yoga practice. But as we begin to sort of study and understand the philosophical foundation, then we better have the foundation to investigate what that really means in our own experience. And in yogic philosophy and in all of these different Eastern philosophies, there is also sort of something we call, it can be called a lot of different things, but in yoga philosophy, we often call it universal law. And universal law is the way that life vibrates in balance, in harmony. And that's often why, has anyone ever like been in a city for a while? And I see you guys sitting in front of these beautiful trees. So maybe you can be the testament, right? So you're like indoors for a while and you start to feel a little out of balance, a little out of harmony. And you just like walk outside and stand under a tree and everything feels right again, even if it's just for a split second. Why? Because that tree is in balance with natural law, right? 99% of the time, depending on your environment, like we feel better in nature because there is a particular way that prana moves and manifests in nature. And in yogic philosophy and in traditional Chinese medicine and in even Taoism and Buddhism, the human being is seen as a microcosm of the macrocosm. And it's a really beautiful practice to do also if you have the chance. Who knows when we're going to get on airplanes again, but if you get on an airplane or a hot air balloon and you rise above the earth surface and you look down, essentially what you're looking at is like a body worlds of us, the rivers, the valleys, the mountains. This is all the tapestry of how physically, right, we function and manifest in the world. And so the nadis are a really beautiful way to help us understand how all of the functions of our body are integrated. And I know that it said in the introduction that we're going to talk a little bit about the meridians of traditional Chinese medicine as well, but let's embark on now this deeper journey, really looking at the nadis. So again, there is a way that energy moves in the universe, and there's a way that energy tends to move within our bodies. And essentially what the nadis are the pathways or the tubes that are not tangible. So we don't see them, we don't touch them, we don't even necessarily measure them, but these are all the little tubes and sometimes big tubes that carry prana all throughout the body to create the animation of every function of the body. Did that make sense? Yeah. So we are kind of like a beautiful spider web or highway of nadis. And if anyone has seen the Body Worlds exhibit, it's the plastination. It's actually really fascinating because our modern minds always sort of want to make a segue between what we can't see, sort of the magic of what we understand to be true, and what we can see. And so if you look even in a textbook at the nature of the circulatory system and the nervous system, right, you start to kind of get an idea of how the nadis would look if we could see them. And in fact, there's a lot of modern science that really wants to make these associations between the circulatory system and the nervous system and the lymphatic system with the nadis. And it is actually the prana that holds these systems intact. It is the prana that holds your arteries as arteries so that prana can move the blood through them. So in essence, it is kind of part of the nadi system, but the nadi system actually even is more pervasive than these structures. But it's nice to kind of visualize them so we get an idea of kind of this tapestry of communication that we're talking about when we're talking about the nadis. And in most traditional texts, they say there are 72,000 nadis in the body. Who counted this number? I have zero idea. It comes from, right? So a lot of this information comes from sages and saints and teachers from a time of meditation and a time of contemplation where there were not so many outside forces distracting the mind away from the understanding that essentially we're really aspiring to regain as yogis. And that is an understanding of all the parts of us that we can't feel, that we can't touch, but that we know really exist. So 72,000, just because it's important to say that this is in the ancient text. Some texts actually say more. Some say that the 72,000 actually branch into 72,000 more. But again, this is not so important. It's like the red, green, and yellow of the chakras. It is a stabilizing way for us to talk about it, but it's not something to be memorized, because if we're talking about vibration, does your trumpet sound the same today as it sounded yesterday? I mean, probably loosely, but right, there's always going to be a little variation because life is always changing. So just so you don't feel like you have to hang on to some of those things. So the nadis are communicative pathways throughout the body that carry prana from one place or another so that it can animate all of the functions of the body. And as yogis, and I'm just going to do a little time check here because now Julia knows I get really excited talking about these things. As yogis, there are really three major nadis with which we are concerned. And that I say this, but I want you to take it with a grain of salt, because if we're really yogis and if we're really approaching our life as wanting to find harmony, then you already know somewhere in the back of your mind that I'm completely lying, because these three are only the most important because they are three of the most easily accessible through the practices of yoga, and they sort of create the foundational energy for many of the other nadis. But it's sort of like if you say, I really want to eat healthy, so you only eat lettuce, it's not going to be that healthy. Even though lettuce is healthy, if you only eat lettuce, you're not going to be healthy, right? So all 72,000 nadis are highly important, but this is sort of like a centralized system that is a little bit more accessible through the practices of yoga. And because what we're trying to do is heighten our wisdom and understanding about what we're doing when we engage in the practice of yoga, we sort of focus on these three. And these three are called Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna. And anyone who wants a Word document of notes after they see this lecture or listen, or if you listen again and you just want to see a little bit of this in writing, you just email me and I will be happy to send you some of the visualizations so you can see it again. So Sushumna Nadi is actually the last one we're going to talk about, but I'm going to tell you just where it is first, because it's an important sort of reference for the other two major nadis in the body. And Sushumna Nadi is said to come from the base of the spine all the way through the spine up to Sahasrara chakra, which is the crown chakra, the crown vortex of energy at the top of the head, that is ultimately, in a way, the opening of the chakra system to natural law, to the universal consciousness. So this nadi, this flow of energy, is a very powerful structure of energy that really comes from our lowest vibration, which is Muladhara chakra, all the way through the spine to what is the highest vibration of our physical body, right? The structure that houses at least Annamaya Kosha and all of the other subtle bodies, to Sahasrara chakra. And if you're not familiar with the chakras, I think everyone has at least, I mean, they're so pervasive everywhere. It seems like these days, everyone wants to talk about the chakras. And they're pretty cool, but I actually think all the other stuff is a little bit cooler. And it's easy to get lost in the chakras. So just know, if you're not so familiar with the chakras, essentially what they are is little energy vortexes. And if you're a little bit more in the Western mindset as you're joining for this particular lecture, you can even think of like the nerve plexuses. They're a little bit like this. So little energy vortexes that also align themselves with the spine. Some say in the spine, sometimes some say just anterior to the spine. But these are sort of powerhouses of functionality of prana, especially as how it is moving through Sushumna Nadi. Okay. So Sushumna Nadi is really our like central station, our central line, like tune in Tokyo. This is kind of how we access it all. Ida and Pingala, however, are perhaps even more important, because Ida and Pingala are really the keys to how the energy of Sushumna Nadi flow. And Ida Nadi is often called the Chandra or lunar Nadi. So why did I present to you the Tai Chi symbol? Because what we're going to begin to see is that all of the subtle body in some way is a representation of how vibration and relationship of vibration is manifesting in our experience in this life. So Ida, did you catch that? I think so. Yeah. So Ida Nadi is the Chandra or lunar Nadi. So this is the Nadi that has a more yin-like energy. And if you remember those qualities of yin, they are inertia, more form-oriented. Sometimes we can even say sort of like that energy of gravity, of form, but also of quiet, of reprieve, of riprendere. Oh, I'm thinking of it only in Italian, of like recuperation, right? The yin energy is really important in healing processes because we have to pull away from action, from doing, in order to let the body do what it wants to do. And Ida, its pathway, and if you want to close your eyes, maybe it's easier to visualize, but maybe you'll get a little bit more lost. If you imagine where Muladhara chakra is at the very base of the spine, the way that the energy of Ida Nadi flows is that it exits the spine to the left. And it makes a little curve and crosses the next chakra. So really crossing Sushumna Nadi, and makes a little curve as it's rising toward the head and crosses the next chakra, and rises and curves and crosses the next chakra. So if you're following along, we're at Vishuddhi, the throat chakra, and rises and curves again until it arrives at Anya chakra, which is in the center of the brain. This is the third eye chakra. Okay, did you follow me there? It then accesses energetically to the left nostril. And this is going to be really important for our investigation of our yoga practice. And again, the energy of this nadi of Ida that is spiraling from the left of Muladhara chakra, exiting the left of the bottom of the spine, spiraling across all of the chakras, coming to Anya chakra and exiting the left nostril. What do you imagine happens if I can't close my right nostril because my nose is broken, but if I closed my right nostril and I just was breathing through my left nostril, you can even try it and just, I know we're doing this loosely, not really as a practice, right? But just this action of breathing through the left nostril is deeply accessing the energy of this entire nadi that is spiraling across your spine. Ida nadi also controls the right side of the brain. So although energetically it is left-sided as it travels through the physical body, it controls the right side of the brain, which is the side of the brain, right, that is a little more holistic, a little more creative, a little more expansive and omniscient in its activity. And Ida Nadi physiologically highly relates in its activity to the parasympathetic nervous system. So we start kind of creating a picture here that's quite beautiful, right? Parasympathetic nervous system is our feed and breathe, rest and digest. And if we remember again that Ida is our lunar channel, accessing this energy of feed and breathe, of cultivation, of form, of inertia, of rest, of night, of femininity, of creativity, of omniscience. This is how all of the manifestations of this energy in our experience as human beings begins, through this particular nadi. Are you with me? Yeah, okay. Its partner is Pingala nadi. Pingala exits the base of the spine, exits Muladhara chakra, our base chakra, to the right, and has a very similar pathway as Ida, except for that it exits to the right, it rises and curves to cross Swadhisthana chakra, rises and curves to cross Manipura chakra, rises and curves to cross Anahata chakra, the heart chakra, rises and curves through the throat, rises and curves again to join at Anya chakra, the third eye chakra, and then has a pathway down to the right nostril. And so this right-sided, energetically oriented pathway that it takes from the lowest of our vibrational forces to one of the highest of our vibrational forces can be directly accessed through the right nostril. And so again, if you followed along or you just tried it, I invite you to, and you know, when you're doing any of the nostril breathing, of course, if you have any kind of obstruction, or there are a lot of different ways to address this, but since this is a philosophy class, we're not going to go exactly into the physical practice, but you know, you can also try also just breathing through the right nostril and seeing if that seems to have a different energetic in the body from the left. And if it does or it doesn't, it's not right or wrong. But again, these are just the foundations for a heightened sense of awareness of what could be going on in the body. And Pingala, as its partner to the lunar channel, so Pingala, also called Surya, or the sun channel, right? Exiting the right nostril, but controlling the left side of the brain. So the more mathematical, scientific, linear side of the brain. So this energy also spiraling up the spine, exiting to the right, accessing the right nostril, joining and crossing with Ida Nadi at Anya Chakra, the third eye chakra, but controlling the left side of the brain and also having a deep accessing power on the sympathetic nervous system, which is fight or flight. And if you remember that idea of yin and yang and these relating forces, right? This yang force, this Surya Nadi carries with it exactly this metabolic force, fire, energizing force, masculine, day, sun, warmth. On the other side, lunar, cooling, density, water. So already, maybe if you've never heard, right, some of the more specifics about these nadis, who's listening has just heard of Ida and Pingala? Yes. Not so, some yes and some no. Great. And for those of you who have heard of them, have you already heard once or twice or 100 times about the different qualities in this way? Not so much, yeah. So if you go back to our two foundational premises, that all of life is vibration and all of life is relationship, as we see it, that we are the microcosm of the macrocosm of universal law, at the very foundation of how prana is moving through and animating your body are essentially yin and yang, spiraling and dancing beautifully up and along the spine. I don't know about you, but the first time I learned about it, I was like, wow, that's so cool. Somehow I like wanted to sit up straighter, like, wow, I actually have like this very foundational life force in me already. How many of us in our yogic path, we like going all around like, oh, I'm tired, I don't have enough energy, I'm not well, and we're searching outside. And how many of us also have been completely annoyed when a yoga teacher is like, you have everything within you. I don't know, sometimes when I heard that at the beginning of my yoga journey, I was like, no, I don't. Clearly I have to go look for it. But okay, so now we just start to see, and of course I have to add a little humor, because if we don't find joy in the investigation of yoga, I just don't think that we're actually in the realm of yoga. But so here at the very foundation of how your subtle body is animated are Ida and Pingala Nadi, the lunar and Surya Nadis, the sun and moon Nadis, that are essentially working their way from the low vibration at the base of the pelvis to the highest vibration that we experience as human beings, which essentially is at the top of the head, or eventually at the top of the head. And has anyone ever seen the symbol for medicine? Ah, yeah, I see your smiles. Like, yeah, wow. Okay, so this comes actually from Hippocrates. And if you're not clicking as fast as some others, the symbol for modern medicine, right, is two snakes around a pole. So, I mean, they actually did the work for us. Essentially, what that represents is Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, which is really cool. It comes from a different tradition. That symbol comes from a Greek tradition. And the snakes are because in Greek mythology and in the history of Greek medicine, the snakes were the carrier of the cure. But somewhere along the way, right, when we talk about yoga, what we're talking about is wisdom that comes down to us from lineages that are modern and are modern storytellers. But the truth of yoga is something universal. It's without designation of culture, of tradition, of anything, right? And so, oh, Bill's, okay, I see Bill's mouth moving, but no, you're fine. I thought maybe you were trying to talk to me, right? But so we have already across time and space a representation of the Nadi system in a system that is technically unrelated. There's actually a beautiful, deep mythological meditation tradition in Greece. I'm discovering more and more as I spend more time there that actually also has a Nadi system in it. But anyway, so at the very foundation of your being, you have these two nadis that represent seeming dualities, but as we understand from this sort of primordial representation of life in the Tai Chi symbol, right, harmony comes when dualities are dancing together, when the line in the middle is not straight, but rather a beautiful dance of fluidity, understanding that the 50-50 is relative, right? If it is nighttime, you want an abundance of yin because you want to rest. If you're 50-50, you're gonna be like this all the time. But when you go to work and you have to make a presentation or you have to give a lecture on Zoom, which is completely out of the realm of anything that I imagined I would be doing, you want to access that Pingala Nadi a little bit more, right? You want a little bit more of the yang. It doesn't mean that I'm out of balance. It means that I'm in the flow and that I understand that it's the yin that's keeping me ballasted so that the energy flowing through me can be brighter. Does that make sense? And this is why in the practice of yoga, especially the practice of pranayama, yoga gives us these beautiful ways to access and harmonize these energies. Alternate nostril breathing. I'm sure all of us at one point or another, and again, this isn't unfortunately the time constraints of this particular lesson. We're not going to go into the practical, but just to tell you, already as Hatha yogis, you have these incredible tools to harmonize and access all of the infinite manifestations of these two foundational energies of your life that are these two nadis that spiral up your spine. So that's pretty neat, right? We have alternate nostril breathing. We have, today I tried to do the neti pot for the first time. We even have physical cleansing practices that access directly the energy of how these meridians are flowing, right? You feel low of energy, so you breathe a few times through the right side of your nose. You're feeling a little panicked because you have to give a presentation. You pause and you close your eyes and you access your lunar energy just a little bit, right? Not to sedate, but to keep in that relative relationship of these primordial dualities of life that you have, that are actually the very foundation of you. So the way that yoga philosophy presents this story to us is that then we have Sushumna Nadi, which, as you can imagine, if we have parasympathetic nervous system, sympathetic nervous system represented in these two, right brain, left brain, right nostril, left nostril, Sushumna Nadi has a special kind of energy that actually typically only flows when Ida and Pingala are in harmony with one another. And so throughout the day, it's not uncommon to get little shots of Sushumna Nadi. So again, we're back to that original Nadi, right, that comes from the base of the spine all the way to the top of the head. But typically this Nadi opens when the other two Nadis that are crossing the chakra system with it are in harmony with one another. And in the tradition of Hatha yoga and in the tradition of even Raja yoga and many of the lineages, I'm certain that you've heard of the sort of vital energy that exists in Muladhara chakra, right? The Kundalini energy. And Kundalini yoga is actually all about Sushumna Nadi. This Kundalini energy, when it has the ability to rise through Sushumna, is what eventually opens Sahasrara chakra to give us complete access to the universal wisdom. And again, this begins to go a little bit beyond just this topic. It's so hard to, because now that we know life is all about relationship, it's hard to just isolate the nadis without talking about these other things. So again, just let what sediment is really coming, let the shower that's happening for you happen. And the next time we meet, we go a little bit deeper. So if Sushumna Nadi isn't firing, is that a problem? No, it's really natural. Imagine if you were walking around through life, even if you can imagine it, right, with access to all the wisdom of life all the time. We might actually go a little bit crazy. We might, depending on the functionality of the body. And so in a way, it's scientifically very beautiful that even we as creatures animated by these three major nadis have the grounding energy of yin, so that Sushumna is not necessarily open all the time. But how we engage in our yoga practice is in essence all directed toward trying to get Sushumna Nadi to flow. Why? In Hatha Yoga, in the asana practice, in the physical practice, are not most asanas related to elongating and lengthening and making more supple the spine? I mean, I know we do crazy stuff with our arms and legs because they're attached to our central skeletal system, right? But how can we access the complete suppleness of this central line without having integration in everything that's stemming out from it? It's like trying to grow a plant, right, with only paying attention to one root instead of all the roots. That was a terrible metaphor, but maybe you're just following me anyway. Are you kind of with me? Bill's laughing. Great. Okay, good. I like when I make people laugh, then I know we're still human beings together. Okay. And so when we are moving our body through the asana practice, there are a couple really magical things here. One, every movement we make with our body is facilitating the fluidity of all the nadis throughout the body. So even if you walk away from this lecture and you're like, I don't remember a thing she said, like truly, but I think she said, make sure you make it onto your mat every day. The reason is that if you just move your physical body in a coordinated way, you are facilitating the harmonious flow and structure of the nadi system. Then, as we become more comfortable in our own skin, we begin to investigate the pranayama practices, which directly help us to access the level at which we find the nadis, which is the pranic body, the vital body. And as we grow a little bit more sophisticated and wise in our pranayama practices, we are cultivating the movement of these nadis in the same way we're cultivating the fluidity and structure of our body with the asana. So that's kind of neat, right? I mean, how many of us think, especially more toward the beginning of our practice, we think, okay, and now I'm breathing because that's going to help harmonize, my breath, or it's going to help me breathe more deeply. But if you imagine the structure of the nadis and you imagine that this is how pranic force is moving through your body, and you imagine that the breathing is like the bellows to how this is energized, how this movement of prana is energized through the body, you are tapping into an incredible resource when you just pay attention to how you breathe. When you remember to breathe in a traumatic moment. When you remember to exhale a little bit longer than you inhale when you're feeling a little panicked. Right? So in this way, the very foundation of just the initial practices of Hatha Yoga are helping us constantly to harmonize how the movement of energy is flowing through the body. So that's pretty neat. Yeah. And so I want to be mindful also. Sorry, let me check the time. Okay. So I know we're good. Okay, so I know I want to also just leave a little bit of time for questions and answers. you're going to answer my questions, okay? That's how it's going to work this time. I think that would be fun, actually, to go to a Swami and he'd be like, okay, now it's time for questions and answers. What are your answers? This would be true yoga practice. No. But so now I want to take just a tiny step back. Because what we've done is we've kind of started really big, right? Vibration, foundation of life, relationship. We went really super small into all the ways that, I mean, not all the ways, but in a general sense, to begin imagining all of the ways that prana is flowing through the body. And specifically these three major nadis, Ida, Pingala, and Sushumna, and sort of this beautiful foundation of all that animates you is really a relationship between yin and yang. And when we are able to cultivate our choices in life to keep a harmony between yin and yang, to keep a harmonious flow between those two nadis, we have access, right, to the wisdom that the yoga teacher, I mean, essentially when a yoga teacher says you have everything within you, it's true. But what is infinite within you is actually all the truth of the world, all the truth of how the world works. And so when Sushumna is opening, it is also helping us to open to the wisdom of everything. It sounds a little esoteric, but how many of you have ever had what we lovingly call like a state of grace? Have you ever had one of those split seconds in life where like just for a second, everything feels good and you feel like you understand? It's not even like understanding something. It's just like a split second. I see a few of you shaking your head. Just think about it. And if it's not coming to you directly, you know, just jot it down in the corner of I'm a corner journal jotter, right? Like jot it down. And the next time, everyone has had one. I'm certain of it. I'm certain of it. And what these moments of grace are, what these moments of like, everything's good, are when Sushumna Nadi is flowing. And it doesn't necessarily have to happen because we've cultivated ourselves as practitioners. It can also happen, right, when the right relationships are coming together, how we've nourished ourselves, how we've slept, what environment we place ourselves in, who we've spent time with. Because it's not enough just to be a beautiful trumpet ourselves, but the symphony happens when all the instruments, right, come together in a coordinated way. And we should say, if your mind is beginning to expand, like, oh, world peace, this and that, yes, but please imagine that if we are the microcosm of the macrocosm, there are in fact rivers, which is one kind of symphony. There are in fact mountainous regions, which is another kind of symphony. There are in fact valleys. And each of us as human beings is kind of drawn naturally to different environments. I'm a mountain girl. When I'm in the mountains, I'm like, wow, life is right. Everything makes sense. My husband, when he's at sea, it's the same for him, right? And that's kind of the beauty of life. All of this to say that just because we're yogic practitioners, just because we begin to tap into the wisdom of the subtle body and begin to understand and cultivate these energies with a little bit more intention, doesn't mean we're meant to play in every single symphony that exists in life. And this is the first step away toward why does it matter that we know about any of this stuff anyway? And the reason that it matters is because typically, as human beings, I'm going to say, because it's the only filter that we can really truly know life through, we don't tend to investigate things. We have a little monkey who joined the class. I love it. We don't tend to investigate things when they're good. Am I right? When your life is going well, you're like, wow, cool, things are good. You're not like, why are things going good? Why do I feel well? Why is this person being nice to me? Why do I feel happy all the time? Typically, we're not doing this. But when things go wrong, well, then we're questioning everything. And not only everything, but like even the things we don't need to be questioning, we're questioning, right? And so as the story of yoga tells us, there was a moment in time where everything was still in balance. And as life grew more complicated, there were more tendencies that also came to be of not necessarily resonating with natural law, of not necessarily resonating in harmony. And on a human level, we can definitely understand this just as human beings, right? Who has made a wrong decision? Sorry, I mean, all of us have. No one cannot raise their hand. And when you make the wrong decision and you realize you make the wrong decision, you're like, you feel bad, right? And you don't just feel bad in your mind or your heart, like you feel it everywhere. And what is this? This is a vibration that is being sent through your Nadis system, that is being vibrated to every part of your being, every part of your experience. See? And so most of us enter into the investigation or even the conversation with the yogic path because there's some question that we have about either wanting to understand life better or feeling maybe that we're not completely in harmony and wishing to be in greater harmony, right? And as we extrapolate that out, what we can do is 1,000,001 plus investigations about how we fall out of the dance of duality. Because I can guarantee you that no time you are suffering is the time where you haven't fallen to one polarity or the other. Where you have either fallen into the pool of yang and you don't see the black dot or the white dot of yin anymore. Yang, I'm just saying that backwards. But anyway, you're following me. It's quite hard to do it without. I love having like a whiteboard and then that, but I can understand and see in your faces that you're doing amazing, right? So there's no time of suffering as a human being that exists that isn't in part due to us falling to one polarity or another. What is neat about this is that if through the cultivation of our practice, which by the nature of simply practicing brings us to a heightened level of presence and awareness, when we begin to feel even the beginning of the blossoming of something uncomfortable, we can pause and we can begin to distinguish which polarity we have fallen into. Is it a yang polarity? Is it too much fire? Is it too much energy? Is it too animated? Is it a yin polarity? I feel stuck. There's nowhere to go. I have no movement, right? And if we could even simply identify in that moment or as close to that moment as possible that we are falling into a polarity with these at least 2 of the 3 major nadis, we already have a tool. And I know it sounds silly, but it really isn't silly because it's the science of how you're put together. You now somehow in your intelligence have a very specific tool to say, oh, I'm falling a little bit into depression, which is inertia, which is yin. Could I get up every morning and for 3 minutes breathe through my right nostril to re-engage a little bit of yang, to reanimate the energy that I'm forgetting about? And what you're going to say to me is that it's so much more complicated than that because I'm depressed because my boyfriend broke up with me and I, have to move out and all of these reasons that are actually extrapolations of the mind. But if the very foundation of the idea of yoga is one of unity, imagine life as kind of a pyramid. The tip of the pyramid is universal consciousness. It's the place where life is in ultimate harmony. The next 2 little lines that come from that tip are like yin and yang, right? From the one come the 2. And all the rest of the pyramid of life are the millions of diversifications of how vibration is manifested into all that we're experiencing in life. And so while it may seem like an oversimplification, what the Nadi system really gives us access to is that original relationship of life. And so as a first stepping stone, I'm not saying that you might not have to work through what the mind is doing and what stories it's telling, but I can definitely guarantee that if you provide your body with the energetic tapestry of harmony, that the oscillations of the mind and all of the storytelling that is the tendency of the mind to do when we have reached a polarity is going to be less. And thereby the clarity of why you don't feel good is going to be so much more. Did you follow that little journey? Yeah. So we can't solve all the problems of how we each feel out of sync in every moment of life. But the real gift of the yoga practice in my mind, and I'm sure that you've heard this in different ways, is just that if we step onto the mat beyond anything else we know, if we even have a remote understanding that our whole body is integrated, animated, energized by the Nadi system, every time we step onto the mat, whether it's 5 minutes, I can remember times when I've done my self-practice and I step onto my mat and I get into child's pose, and 15 minutes later, I'm still in child's pose, right? Most likely because that's what I need to access, the energy of Ida Nadi, the energy of lunar, the energy of grounding, right? And part of our self-practice, and that's a different topic also, is finding that intuition to follow what we need. But just by stepping on the mat and using our physical body in an integrated way, we are beginning to bring a greater harmony to how the energy that animates all of you is moving. And then as we become and we learn more sophisticated ways to cultivate how the energy of the body is moving, we begin to build more tools. Mudra. What is mudra? Mudra is a very sophisticated way to direct how the energy of the body is moving. Imagine that I have energy lines all through my body, integrating everything. In the traditional Chinese medicine paradigm, it's a little bit easier to picture, and I'm gonna end here because I did promise to mention a little something of this, and then I'll take a few questions. So in traditional Chinese medicine, and as I mentioned in the beginning, and I'm just gonna give you another portal through which to kind of contemplate this idea of how energy is moving through your body. It's the way that the energy pathways move are defined a little bit differently. So think about it as the same wisdom, just different storyteller. And it makes sense because the culture, the environment, right, in China versus India, or the different origins of storytelling are always a little bit different. The characters are always a little bit different, as they should be, because the inspiration, depending on the environment or culture from which they grow, is different. Same wisdom, different storyteller. In traditional Chinese medicine, the way the body is sort of looked at and defined is a network of organ systems. And the organs in traditional Chinese medicine are defined a lot like they're given kind of Western names to help us orient our brain around it. But the way that the energy pathways work in traditional Chinese medicine is that the deepest energy pathways connect the organs to one another. So very deep, very internal, very within the core of the body. So you can imagine, right, if we go back to that idea of Nadi being kind of a tube that carries vital energy. So the most deep meridians in traditional Chinese medicine are connecting the organs to one another. And this is Reader's Digest version. The next layer of meridians in traditional Chinese medicine are connecting each organ to places in the body that it governs. So each organ in traditional Chinese medicine has its own physiological functions, has its own spiritual functions, has its own energetic functions, but also has parts of the body that it is responsible for. And the next layer, which is the most superficial layer, is how this whole network of communication between the organs then gets distributed on the surface of the body. And in fact, this is where the acupuncture points are found, on these most superficial meridians. And if you can imagine in your mind's eye, right, this spider web of energy that is completely integrated, it's impossible to touch one part of one meridian without having some subtle resonance reach every part of every meridian, right? If you're imagining it in this way. So we access the healing of the body actually through the pranic force of the body rather than the physical body. And this is kind of neat. And it's a little bit of difference, I think, between some of the ancient medical practices and some of the modern medical practices. But again, just to give you another visual, right, of how parts of the body communicate. So in an acupuncture session, right, you might get a needle put into a physical place on your body, but the acupuncturist is actually searching for a particular place and a particular depth to reach that invisible river of energy that is flowing toward the animation of a particular function in your body. So we lovingly, as acupuncturists, often call them satellites to the universe. Because if we're a microcosm of the macrocosm, and what a healing process is really trying to do is reintegrate you back into your natural harmony, not an ideal harmony, not the harmony, my harmony is different than Gita's harmony, which is different than Bill's harmony, right? We're all the different instruments in the symphony. Then that's how we are creating an activation into that energy. And that's what we're doing as yogis with our physical practice in a way. And that's what we're doing as yogis with our pranayama practices. And that's what we're doing as yogis with our mudra. And even to some extent with our, well, a big extent with mantra, but that relates a little bit more to the mind. But what we're doing is creating particular ways of how the energy within us is vibrating. And when we become a little bit more sophisticated in understanding, when we start to fall out of balance, we begin to be able to respond to those moments with particular actions to bring back the harmony ourselves. Did that make sense? Sometimes we fall really far out of harmony, and those are the times that we end up seeking an objective intervention, right? Someone to come in and help our body remember how it's supposed to be functioning. So that's where the shaman and the healer and the doctor come in. But we have this beautiful way, I mean, we talk about it all the time, self-healing. And I've gone a little bit down a different kind of rabbit hole, but it's just the direction it seems to be going, right? We talk so much about, oh, yoga is so healing. Why is it healing? Because disease happens on the pranic level. And what is happening vibrationally with the energy of your body begins to become reflected in the physical body. And that's when we begin to recognize. But as yogis, what happens is little by little, we begin to be able to recognize when disharmony is beginning, even at the pranic level. And as keen and aware and happy and joyful practitioners, we can also begin to use our practice to cultivate that type of harmony within ourselves. Make sense? Okay. So I think I will pause there. Does anyone who is signed in today have any questions? You can, maybe the easiest way is to type them in. So we don't have, so Julia doesn't have to be a DJ. But if I don't understand something, then we can, yeah. I see Gita typing, so I'm gonna, and don't be shy. You know, if it's even like, I don't get yin or yang.
I thought actually might be even easier just to ask it rather than spending lots of time typing while everyone's waiting. So there's two questions. So the first one is, you mentioned a bit about mantra, and I was wondering how mantra and kirtan in particular affect energetic levels, because I know when I come out of kirtan, the heart energy, everything just feels amazing often. And the second thing is, it would be great if you could talk a bit about or if you know about Reiki and how that, because Reiki again is something that is a really, when I do it on friends, I know that it's having an impact and they find it quite profound, and I work broadly on the chakra areas, but it would be really interesting to sort of have a sense of maybe a bit more of what's going on in that context as well. I don't know if you're able to share.
Okay, so I'm going to do my best. And when we get into this realm of the subtle body, it's so broad and there's so much depth and there are so many implications. And so your two questions could actually be like lectures in and of themselves. So let me do the first one first. So I know that some of you weren't necessarily with me on Monday when we talked about the koshas. But this idea of the koshas is, and I'm just going to say it like super briefly. So if you get lost, don't worry, just write to me and we can have another conversation, or you can actually watch the recording of Monday too, to get a deeper understanding. But the koshas are the 5 layers through which we experience life as human beings. So in yogic philosophy, they say we have 5 bodies. We're pretty certain we have the physical body. That is kind of a known, right? Like this is a certainty. But yoga says we actually have 4 more subtle bodies through which we are experiencing life. The second body is the pranic body. And this is the energy body, the vital body. And this is what we've been talking about today. This is the body, the layer at which we find the chakras, the nadis, things like emotions, all of these subtle vibrations of our experience of life and how we're animated. The third layer, or the third body, is manomaya kosha, which is actually the mind, the aspect of our self that is not tangible, but that exists, through which we are interacting and experiencing life. And in Hatha Yoga, what they often say is that for Annamaya Kosha, we have asana. So for the physical body, we have asana. For the pranic body, we have pranayama. And for the mind, we have mantra. And what mantra does, the magic of mantra, and thereby bhakti, yoga, kirtan, right? What is music? It is vibration. And especially the music and the songs and the mantras and the chants that are specifically from healing traditions. So I'm going to say kirtan, right? Our mantras are definitely in harmony with the natural realm of things, right? They have the specific power to orient the vibration of the mind and thereby the pranic body in a certain way, in a harmonious way. And so mantra, and the way I like to think about it, like in humanoid terms, is, has anyone ever felt bad and your first inclination is, oh, I want to put on that song, or oh, I want to listen to some music? And we listen to the music and it's like a baby being rocked in a crib, right? Like whatever's wrong, just a little bit, we shave a layer off of that feeling of discomfort. Why? Because the vibration of that sound enters directly into those second 2 subtle layers of our existence. So essentially what music, the vibration of music is doing, is directly accessing the nadis in a way. And so we often feel it at the heart level, because at that same pranic level is the realm of emotion, and all emotions are filtered through the heart. But the reason the heart begins to feel expansive is because the rest of the way that the energy is moving and vibrating in the body is soothed. And that's why also, if you have a yoga practice, if you have a daily practice of even, I didn't mention this, but there are many ancient texts that actually say inherent within Sushumna Nadi is the primordial sound of Om. And so if you have 10 minutes a day of yoga practice where you do 3 sun salutations, you're breathing with your movement, and then you sing the sound Om 5 times at the end of that practice, my God, like, can you imagine? 3 levels of existence, pow. You've just done 10 minutes at the beginning of your day, only 10, and you have already, right, tapped into the harmony of these 3 magnificent layers of how we experience life. Okay, so that's question 1. Good. So Reiki, I have not studied directly Reiki, so I don't really feel very well equipped to answer the question. So I'm going to answer it from a side door. And then if you want to have a conversation about it, I would love to privately. So in the traditional Chinese medical traditions, we have something called Qigong, right? Which Qigong essentially, so we have Tai Chi, which is very similar to the asana practice, and Qigong, which is very similar to like mantra and pranayama together. So Qigong is really like a cultivation of our Qi, a way to cultivate and harmonize the movement of prana within the body. And then I'm sure everyone at some point or another has heard of like Qigong distance healing. So what I understand about Reiki is that it's a very similar type of thing where we are using the vibration of our pranic body to facilitate the better movement of the pranic level of someone else's body. And that's all it is that, and you know, obviously as a practitioner of something that is accessing the pranic layer, which is any Ayurveda, Chinese medicine, Reiki, Qigong healing, it's obviously quite important for us to understand what is ours and what is someone else's, because it's so easy to let things bleed in between. And we all feel it. I think that many of us signed on are in a relationship, right? And when have we not ever experienced us projecting something on our partner, right? And we really believe that it's their problem, but actually what we're doing is like exposing to ourselves what our own problem is. And I know that's not your question, but just to make it relatable in real life, or another example that I gave on Monday of how we experience each other's pranic energy is the example of like walking down the street. If you're walking down the street in New York, there are many people you're going to pass and you're not even going to notice. There's the person you're going to pass and you're just going to spontaneously want to smile at them. And there's another person you're going to pass and you're going to want to run to the other side of the street. And you don't know exactly why, but that is your symphonies, right? Hearing each other's music in a way. That is how we experience each other's pranic level. And so these different healing techniques, especially the ones without physical touch, are really using this layer of our being to facilitate for someone else's layer of that.
Thanks, that's really helpful. Yeah, I think with Reiki, you always have the sense that you're trying to channel it. You're trying to be a clear channel for it coming through you, and not bringing anything for yourself, and not taking anything from anyone else, and really sort of getting out of the way almost. But it's, as you say, in practice, it's quite. I only do it with close friends and things, but that's both really helpful. I actually have a harmonium kids in class starting shortly, and it's lovely to go in kind of knowing kind of the technicalities also of what's happening, as well as just sort of feeling it as well.
Yeah, so that vibration, that musical vibration, it just you know, we say it, right? Like the music just overcomes us, and it's why, and this is like a highly debated topic, is do you use music in a yoga class? Do you not use music in a yoga class? And, you know, if you're doing it intelligently, it can be a beautiful tool for people's process. But if you're teaching a group class, how in the world do you pick the right music for, right? And not only that, but if you think about what an emotion is the end vibration of a process, right? It's the end vibration of the coming together of a lot of other vibrations. The emotion is the result. And what music has the tendency to do is to bring us back to an emotion of a process that we already had, which essentially roots us back to that process or that time or that thought pattern or that, right? And so if used skillfully, what it can do is help us fulfill a process and fully release the experience of the emotion. But more dangerously, what it normally does is it just keeps, I mean, who even, you know, when I was young and I had like experienced my first breakup and I would put on like Air Supply, and it was like just putting a knife in my heart over and over again, because it just kept bringing back the pain of the break, you know, like we do these funny things and somehow it's like reminds us we're human, but it actually is detrimental to our ability to move through these experiences of life. So very powerful when used well, potentially powerful in a way that we wouldn't necessarily want when we don't think about what we're doing. But that's why studying the subtle body can be so beautiful, because we understand that our vibration is in relationship to all the vibrations we choose to surround ourselves with. And I really say choose like that, because there's nothing about where you are right now that is not a direct result of a choice you've made. Nothing.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome, Gita. Thank you for the questions. Any other questions? Are we like head exploding a little bit? We're oscillating with a little bit. Yeah, oscillating with the butterfly wings. Okay, Fia got a few this, a few that. So we're really right on target, because we have the full spectrum of the symphony. And I know I didn't tell my butterfly story, but again, I just want to say the essence of it is that, you know, if you think about the trajectory of your life. Okay, Gita, thank you so much for being here. Namaste. See you soon. If you think about the trajectory of your life and the learning process for anything, right? Who of us has not had the experience, whether you're a professional or whether you're a partner or whether you're a parent, right? Whatever path, and we all have multiple paths, right, that we're journeying in life. Who of us hasn't had that experience where we kind of arrive to a checkpoint and we're like, oh, okay, I get that. And then we arrive 2 years down the line and we're like, oh, actually now I get that. And then 5 more years down the line, you're, okay, wait, actually now I get it, right? Yeah, thumbs up all the way. And this is what we're talking about when we talk about the journey of life, in a way. Whatever it is that you walk away with from this time together is perfect. Whatever you believe you understood or you don't believe you understood, and I'm just going to caution you to not decide what you think you understood right away. Rather, what I want you to do is, just like for a moment right now, just imagine everything like a beautiful shower of fresh water in the Amazon just washed over you. And whatever sticks with you is exactly perfect for your journey right now. And the next time you have the opportunity to come into a relationship or a conversation with this type of information, there's going to be another little aha moment for you. And that is the beauty of the diligence of just staying on the path, of simply putting one foot in front of the other. And whatever makes sense, you do your best to put it into practice every day in every way. Because that's the way we really know we understand, is to experience it in as many ways as possible. And that you didn't understand, who cares? Doesn't matter. Okay.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you so much for joining. I think we have to, we're pretty much there on time, I think, Julia, yeah? Okay, so maybe if I could indulge, because I'm in Italy, and so even though I know we're coming from all over the world, let's just one more time just kind of find a comfortable seat wherever you are. And in that comfortable seat, just feel again your spine lengthening by kind of taking the tips of the ears or the top of the head up. Close your eyes if you haven't already. And for these first few breaths in and out, just see if you can elongate the exhale a little bit more than the inhale. It doesn't have to be scientific. You don't need to count. Just with your mind's eye, your imagination, let the exhale be just a little bit longer than the inhale. And as you're investigating this process of elongating your exhale, see if you can begin to round the edges of your breath a little bit. The inhale just naturally tumbles into the exhale, which is just a little bit longer. And the exhale draws the next inhale in. A really beautiful, soft, fluid way. And take 2 or 3 more deep breaths like this. Full and big without destination. Soft and fluid. And imagining this last exhale or 2 is like reaching down into the deep, fertile soil of your heart and just planting the seeds of today there. And then let go of that imagination and just let your breath return to its natural rhythm, easy, soft, and full. And imagine now for these next few inhales that each inhale is like sun and rain pouring down across your heart to nourish these little seedlings of exploration. And then let that imagination also gently fall away. And just take 2 or 3 more nice, big, deep, natural breaths. And gently bring your palms together in Anjali Mudra in front of the chest. Pressing right palm into left, left into right. Creating a dance of dualities here between your palms, right and left, together in warmth and vibrance, just like Ida and Pingala. Knowing that the very foundation of you is this dance of harmony, this dance of balance. And this simple gesture, a coming home to the remembrance of how all the dualities of our lives can come together to reroot us in balance and harmony. One more nice deep big breath in and a gentle sigh out. And a little fluttering open of the eyes. Namaste, everyone. Thank you so much for being together here. for this sweet little investigation of one little morsel of the yoga path. And please feel free to contact me, to email me, to call me if you have questions that come up. But I invite you to embrace your next steps as just like a gardener. And those beautiful seeds you just planted in your heart, just let them grow and blossom in the time that they will, and they will. See you soon, everyone. So much love to you. Thank you, Julia.
Thank you, Molly.
Thank you, Karen. Karen, are you still with us? Maybe.